Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. And here I have a great article for you guys from the Mobile Report. I will leave a link to it in the description so you guys could check it out. So this is a deep dive, actually something different from the Mobile Report. This is a deep dive into the Q2 earnings from T-Mobile. So I wanted to also go along with this and deep dive into this information that's in this article. So make sure you guys stay tuned because this is going to be a long one. Grab your snacks, popcorn, drinks, and let's get right into it. Billions in revenue. T-Mobile quarterly earnings deep dive for Q2 2023. So I'll just cover the opening paragraph. T-Mobile's Q2 earnings have been revealed and the Un-carrier has a lot to be excited about. It's been nearly 11 years since John Legere took over the company at this point. The trajectory they have set themselves on since then continues to turn heads. So what is T-Mobile's particular fond of this time around? A fair warning, this will be an in-depth and slightly nerdy dive into T-Mobile's quarterly earnings. So here we have the highlights, right? We've already went over this. We discussed that in the video when the earnings dropped. But for those of you who may have not seen the video, T-Mobile added a postpaid net account of 299,000 customers. They added a total postpaid net addition of customers of 1.6 million. They added postpaid phone net customers of 760,000. Also, the service revenue grew 3% year over year. It's now at 15.7 billion. Net income is now at 2.2 billion. That grew 2.3 billion year over year. Core adjusted EBITDA is now at 7.3 billion. That grew 11% year over year. So the net cash grew 3%. Free cash flows at 2.9 billion for the quarter. That grew 64% year over year. And then fixed wireless access home internet, they added 509,000 customers, outgrowing every home internet provider combined. And then there's some notations on the 5G overall coverage, 98%. And the Ultra 5G capacity now covers 285 million people. So this is interesting. This is a good deep dive because we got the Root Metrics reports, and T-Mobile finished last overall, which was to be expected. I didn't expect anything else. They still lack behind at the state level, but it hasn't affected T-Mobile's overall success as a company. That's what the financials show. They keep growing year over year. Eventually, they will get to even more respectable numbers and closer to Verizon and AT&T as they continue growing the way they are. So something interesting to note, and I'm sure this deep dive will get into that too. T-Mobile's churn for the second quarter was 0.77%, lowest in the industry. They just finished third place overall on a scientific network testing firm that's nationwide, 240,000 miles driven. It was like 2.5 million tests ran. T-Mobile finished last in that testing, but they had the best and leading industry churn. Means customers are not leaving them. So the network must be good enough. We got to call it how it is. You can go back and forth. The network must be good enough for T-Mobile to maintain the lowest churn and finish last in network testing, in scientific network testing. So briefly, I want to take you guys back to the early LTE days, right? HSPA transitioning to LTE. Both Sprint and T-Mobile had horrible networks, and they were the cheapest, but their churn was high, so of well over 2%. Verizon and AT&T were intercepting those customers left and right. Why was that the case? Because the networks were just that bad. It was never the price. Customers liked the price. They didn't want to leave the price. But the phones were so unusable in many cases that the customer was so frustrated that they just had to leave. And it reflected in that churn. It really did. But now it's harder to kind of identify because T-Mobile has the lowest churn. They still finished last. They've never finished, in the first or second ranking overall on root metrics. They've always been third or fourth. Now it's third because there's no fourth player. But when Sprint was around and they were tested, it was them back and forth. But if you look at it from a scale perspective, T-Mobile was just bad, right? Early on, outside of city limits, it was roaming on AT&T. That was capped. So that was terrible. Within the city, they weren't fully LTE yet. They had no low band. They were still running HSPA, some LTE on in some parts. So it was a bad experience. Calling was bad. Indoors wasn't great because they had no low band. So the churn really reflected that. But now it's a totally different ballgame for T-Mobile. Now they got low band. They got a good chunk of it. They got about 31 megahertz on average nationally once they got the 600 megahertz on air. So a lot of areas, there's 15 by 15, 20 by 20, N71. So that helps them indoors. They now have the 2.5, so there's a lot of capacity on air. They gained additional density sites from Sprint, these Sprint Keep sites. So it's working. The churn is low. They still don't rank the best on network at the 92 score that they got, but it's enough to keep the customer on board. So T-Mobile is all about setting the standard for subscriber counts here. They say they lead the industry in multiple postpaid categories. Examples provided including net account additions, net customer additions, and phone net customer additions. So that's something that T-Mobile usually leads in, and they seem to be continuously leading in that throughout these past quarters, and it looks like they will in the future quarters. It doesn't stop there. With 509,000 home internet net customer additions being more than AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, and Charter combined, and that's a fifth quarter in a row. Although I do want to put in a disclaimer, growth on fixed wireless access for T-Mobile was a little soft. Right, this was probably a weaker quarter for them, although 509,000, congratulations, that's a lot of customers added on that front, but it's still relatively weak compared to previous quarters where they did 530, 550. So that was a bit concerning for analysts, but I don't think that's a big issue in the future. I think T-Mobile will just naturally ramp up and accelerate that growth. So here's a future outlook for 2023. They had another beat and raise quarter. So they raised and revised just about almost every metric across the board. So postpaid net customer additions, they raised it from 5.3 to 5.7 to 5.6 to 5.9. So that's a pretty steep increase by about 250,000. So that's good to see, right? That shows that T-Mobile is expected to grow even more than they originally anticipated. Core adjusted EBITDA is up to 28.9 to 29.2 billion. It's up by about 50 million. That's good to see. Merger synergies, they're accelerating them faster than they anticipated. So now the merger synergies are expected to come in right at the 7.5 billion, which is a change at the midpoint of 100 million. So that's also good to see. Merger-related costs, there's no change there. That's 1 billion. That was to be anticipated. Net cash provided by operating activities is up 50 million, 18.0 to 18.3 billion. That's good to see. Then the capital expenditure, I anticipated this to continue to go up gradually as they move through these quarters. It's now up 50 million, 9.5 to 9.7 billion. That's good to see, and no change on free cash flow, which is expected to come in at the end of the year, 13.2 to 13.6 billion. That makes T-Mobile very flexible. So these are some of the customer-centric key call-outs that I wanted to also go over with you on this video. So T-Mobile is good at what they do, right? They have more work to do. We see it on the scientific network testing. It's their product that they're offering. For now, T-Mobile is comfortable. It seems to be good enough based on the churn. So they're not going to do anything overly aggressive. They're not going to come out and tell you, we're going to raise CapEx by 5 billion in the next quarter because this, that, and the third. They're not going to do that because there's no need for it, right? It would really tick off investors. They would get concerned. They would say, where's this coming from? And they would be like, why? If your churn is the lowest in the industry, why all of a sudden are you going so aggressive, right? So nothing like that is going to come out of the ordinary. But, here are some interpretations of the data also provided in the quarterly earnings report centered around customers. That is something that T-Mobile has focused on, and I think that is a huge contributor to the churn being as low as it came in. So year over year, postpaid ARPA increased 1%, primarily due to an increase in customer per account, including continued adoption of high-speed internet customers. That's a huge deal added to the account. Higher premium service, primarily high-end rate plans, step up to the Go 5G Plus. That's now more expensive than the Magenta Max. That's still going to help increase in the coming quarters. Partially offset by increased promotional activity, an increase in high-speed internet-only accounts, and growth in rate plans for specific customer cohorts, business, military, first responders. So that's just something that they throw in, but that's good to see, right? ARPA is the average price per account, and that's something that T-Mobile really focuses on because they can include several more lines outside of just wireless. That's connected devices, smartwatches, everything else. So postpaid phone ARPU was relatively flat. That's the one that can get tricky due to increased promotional activity and growth in rate plans for specific customer cohorts, business, military, first responders, mostly offset by higher premium service, primarily high-end rate plans. So again, T-Mobile disclosed that, ARPU is not really something to judge them on because they have other segments that they compete in that are lower price, but that create high CLV. So those are more long-term customers that they're more interested in. So sequentially, postpaid ARPA increased 1%. And then the same thing is listed again. So you guys can check that out as well I'll leave a link to this in the description. So to end it off, I just want to read this out. In the end, T-Mobile appears to provide the best value when comparing available competitors' data. Their 138.94 revenue per account is far lower than Verizon's 154.51, meaning accounts spend less as a whole being at T-Mobile. This does not account for account size or line counts, so that is something to consider. So again, T-Mobile still provides the best value. Even looking at ARPU against the competition, here's an example. AT&T comes in at 55.63. T-Mobile's at 48. So that implies that a line of service is still, or lines of service are still significantly cheaper overall at T-Mobile. Plus all of the value that you get on top of it still being cheaper. And that comes with, the multi-line discount that you get on the account, the free lines, 20% off, all of that is included. So T-Mobile's still largely ahead when it comes to value on pricing. Now, AT&T and Verizon could close that gap at any moment. Haven't yet, but I suspect something will change in the future. If you look at this in-depth deep dive from the mobile report, you should start noticing a trend. T-Mobile continues to grow. They continue taking customers. And when they have that customer in their possession, so to speak, the sales team, they can do whatever they want with that customer in that sense, right? They can upsell them to the higher end rate plan. They can sell them fixed wireless access. They can sell them smartwatches and add-ons to the account. But, as long as the foot traffic is coming in the doors, they can continue to do that. That's where Verizon has a big issue. Verizon doesn't have that foot traffic coming into the stores. So their numbers look totally different and their future outlook is totally different because they don't have the same foot traffic. So just wanted to make this video to to share this report with you guys. This is more of an in-depth deep dive, so I'll leave a link to it in the description so you guys could check it out, read it all for yourselves. Again, T-Mobile's still the value winner. It shows you that the network is not the end-all be-all, right? They came in third place on root metrics, but they still have the lowest churn in the industry. They still have the most growth. So the best network that they keep calling out, that's going to be a tough one to argue moving forward, in my opinion. Looking at everything objectively, they have the best 5G availability and the 5G speeds. I'll give them that. But to continuously say that they have the best network and best value, it's going to be tough, in my opinion, to keep pushing that, especially when they're so far behind at the state level on root metrics. I still anticipate they have multiple years of continuous investment and tower builds to really close that gap. And Verizon and AT&T are not stopping, so it's gonna be tough. But again, the overall strategy is working. That's what this in-depth review will show you. And the churn is reflecting that the network is good enough. The consumer likes the pricing. They like the service. They're sticking around. So that, in the end, is all what matters. So make sure you guys stay tuned for more. Like, share, subscribe. Follow my social media outlets. This is Tyrone with Tech Life, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.